So what happened was Monday morning we prayed in DC at the Lincoln Memorial at 6 a.m. It was really rainy.
About to take off. It's already raining out, so I'm gonna head to the car and then head to Lincoln.
It's gonna be a good day. Gonna be a good day. I'm Kelly, and I'm here at the Find a Way Relay. So we're running from DC to St. Louis, and there's 10 of us.
The first time the group will be all together will be at the Lincoln Memorial this morning.
The end gathering is the Worldwide Taizé Conference on Racial Reconciliation, which happens every couple years, and this year it was in St. Louis. Brother Roger founded the Taizé movement during World War II. It was really just a house of prayer in France, and people started coming to this house of prayer to seek God, and it really grew and grew and grew, so that now thousands of people come to Taizé to pray together, and all different countries are represented, and the prayers are in different languages. So it's really a model for reconciliation. So we're really hoping that as we're running, we're going to be praying in this manner of Taizé.
My name is Rita Powell. I'm an Episcopal priest from Trinity Church in Boston, Massachusetts. And I am a part of this run, this Find a Way relay, in part because for me, running is one of the places where I most naturally find God and most naturally find possibilities open up that I don't think I can solve or get near. So working on a sermon or getting mad at somebody, a run will often open some things up. My husband and my 2 children are running as well. My family being part of it was really important to me because my this question of how do you teach race to your children? How do you possibly impact change in any kind of way? Well, maybe bringing the next generation into the conversation now so that they begin in the same place that I am at age almost 40, when they're 7, will that bear some fruit maybe?
We're just hoping and praying that as we run, we can better kind of prayerfully understand and engage in racial reconciliation.
Laudate omnes gentes, laudate Dominum, laudate omnes gentes, laudate Dominum, laudate omnes gentes, laudate Dominum.
It's just the ceremonial, we're all doing it. This is the first time we've all been together, which is amazing. But here we go, let's do this. How's it feel, guys? Your first race, our first run. Woohoo! Nice. We look great, we're so colorful.
This is the first run, first day.
We just finished running from MLK kind of around a little peninsula to here at the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. So the straight line distance from DC to St. Louis is 710 miles, approximately. So we're gonna try and, our goal is to cover that distance as a group. Everyone who's contributing, total distance, 710 miles. Kind of the issue of racial reconciliation has been growing in the news, and in my childhood it's kind of seemed like, oh, we're past that point. Growing up in a mostly white upstate New York area, but through Kelly and through the group, just kind of, I guess, experiencing it, the pilgrimage. That word, that kind of idea is more what it. That I can conceptualize more than just like a relay run across the country. Like, it's not like it's not for anything specifically. Like, we're not raising money. The mileage isn't contributing to some greater cause, but I mean, I've never been on a pilgrimage before. I still don't know what this is going to involve, but just kind of part of the experience and focusing the attention, stopping everyday life to just really spend some time to think about it. I feel like a lot of deep thinking doesn't happen these days, so we'll just see what comes out of it. So here we are in front of the Capitol of the United States, and we're just praying for reconciliation between God and people and one another, and we're just praying for our leaders of this country to take the lead in the work of reconciliation, and hopefully as we do this pilgrimage, departing from Washington D.C., the Capitol building behind us, just to St. Louis, Missouri, we just pray that God would make a difference.
I'm still very much like just processing the whole experience, and honestly I haven't taken that much time to process it.
I've been taking a little bit of time to think and pray about the whole week, and one of the biggest challenges for me that was connecting this intense running experience every day, 10 miles a day, with somehow this call to racial justice.
Well, I'm feeling like it was a really intense week that is kind of hard to believe happened.
The days were actually way more full than I anticipated before the trip, because we are either going camping or breaking down camp each day, because we camp Tuesday night and Thursday night. So kind of that aspect was one aspect, but also like we'd wake up, we'd kind of get breakfast, we'd do a prayer together, launch out, generally like the bikes would go first, or if we needed to transit to our location, because we were generally transiting between 2 and 4 hours of driving each day.
Look what the directions took us to. What is it, Andrew?
It's a ferry.
There's a giant river and a ferry
There is indeed.
that will take us across. So adventures abound here.
So you're kind of like either going to where you're going to be doing at the start point, or once you're done going to the location you're going to stay at. Or you finish everything and then you go on.
We're all sitting together, and I just proposed, how is this run actually benefiting racial justice or contributing to racial justice? I didn't get it. And I asked people how they were making that bridge happen. And one of the key learnings for me was the idea of pilgrimage. The idea of pilgrimage isn't, it's not just to go somewhere, but it's choosing to go the hard way.
Despite kind of a rough start, worked out pretty well, because we found the Garden of the Gods and these other places that were well worth the experience, that weren't part of the original plan. And also on Friday we ended up doing the kind of going along some of the original Trail of Tears.
Today we're going along the Trail of Tears, where the native people a couple hundred years ago had to be marched away from their homelands, and they call it the Trail of Tears because everyone was really sad about that, and there was a lot of death, and they couldn't bring anything with them, and just a really sad part of our nation's history.
The run was almost entirely about white people stuff. Our team was white. We were running through very white parts of the country, and found myself thinking a lot historically and thinking about the extent to which racial oppression is just unavoidably in the very ground that we're on, and thinking, when we got to St. Louis, the conversation was less about white people. The conversation was more about one very specific community in this moment in time. I started thinking very differently about Jesus on the cross. So I'd always understood that as the big story there is that our guy, our Jesus, dies in this way. And this year I started to think about all the other people who are being crucified at the same time, and the way in which perhaps part of what's important about Jesus dying in that way is that it makes us look at, or invites us to look at, a pattern. So for example, that's a way of, and so for example, going to Ferguson, going to the place where Michael Brown was killed, is not just about Michael Brown being killed, but realizing that it's a thing that happens in our country, that non-white people are able to be killed all the time by police. So this idea of this one focusing icon somehow being able to show a pattern is something that it's changing a little bit maybe how I read the Bible. So.
My name is Angela Richard. I'm the coordinator of Young Adult Ministry for the Archdiocese of St. Louis. The Walk of Trust today is a very symbolic walk. We're going along the Delmar Road. The Delmar Divide, as we know it in St. Louis, really shows a change between St. Louis's economic and racial divisions. So north of Delmar is socioeconomically lower, racially the minorities of St. Louis, and south of Delmar is usually whites, richer white families. So we're really walking along this route to show that we are working towards trust, working towards building a relationship between those broken systems.
Even there, just hearing the stories of pastors talking about the events leading up to Ferguson, and then how Ferguson really changed a lot of approach, how they took to ministry, and new ministries were developed. And the Archdiocese calling in the Taizé brothers on behalf of this is pretty incredible.
Pastors who were really effortlessly connecting their gospel witness with their social activism was newer for me. From just growing up here in Massachusetts, it's more normal for me to understand religious people over here and activists over here, and it was kind of amazing to see people be both things there.
I really began to have a greater hope for unity. People on the trip, there was people all over this political spectrum, from very liberal to pretty conservative, and journeying together. There's something that God does life on life, as you have to rely on trust in each other, that the divisions that seem so pervasive start to fall away. And just the reality that it's not programmed, like that's actually, it changed our mission to be, I started thinking about how can we make it more relational? How can we share stories, our stories of life and faith together? And we're actually incorporating neighborhood dinners starting this fall.
It wasn't about getting to St. Louis. That was never the ultimate destination.
I think what I keep learning is the more I look at the way the idea of race is playing out in and affecting and foundational to our country, the more essential I realize it is. In being a Christian, in following Jesus and having some love and heart for the kind of prophetic vision of justice that he was a part of and he believed in and comes out of, I guess I just continue to feel affirmed that focusing on this as a Christian is pretty central.